Blinken's been behind this, everything. He's behind the overthrow of Ukraine.
Wherever there's a corrupt regime, as much hell as America has raised on the earth.
He's behind funding Israel and all the bombs that they're dropping on these innocent people.
When you have spilled the blood of human beings, has Nigeria dropped an atomic bomb and killed people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
And now here we are in Guatemala, and your country is this on the verge of collapse.
A rogue desk, a rogue portfolio, a rogue network wants to run a covert action in a region, but they don't think the president will approve.
Because it's unelected scumbags in Washington, D.C. think that they are above the fucking law.
They can walk right over to U.S. aid, who can do the exact same thing the CIA does, except they can call it discreet democracy promotion because it's not technically an intelligence agency, so it's not technically covert action, so it doesn't require executive branch approval.
You're not in any moral position to tell anybody how corrupt they are. You should be quiet.
They lecture us on gosh damn democracy, and here they are, literally rigging democracy.
Yeah.
How dare you put yourself in that position as a moral judge?
Can you tell me a little bit about what your interaction or the interaction with U.S. aid has been here in Guatemala?
One friend of mine came with me and said to me, look, Angel, somebody in some place came to me and said, you are a friend of Angel Pineda. And he was surprised because he said, yes, I know him. Can you give him a message? What they said, tell him that maybe he is playing with fire.
Because with that much blood on America's hands, you have no right to speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of Guatemala and America, lend me your ears, for I bring forth a message of fire and truth. I stand before you, not on my own accord, but as a chosen instrument of the Almighty. God, in his infinite wisdom and his boundless love, has seen it fit to send me on a mission, a divine quest to expose the darkest of evils that fester within every heart within our nation in this child trafficking operation, orchestrated by those who were meant to protect us, the United States government. Let us not falter in the face of this revelation. God has chosen me, and through me, he has chosen each one of you to bear witness to this truth. The Lord does not send his servants into battle unprepared. He has ignited within me and within you a flame of righteous indignation, a passion for justice that will not be quenched until every child is safe, every predator is unmasked, and every shadow of this vile operation is brought into the light. To those who have committed these unspeakable acts, hear this: your days are numbered. We are coming for you, armed not with the weapons of war, but with the divine mandate of justice. You have hidden behind the flag, behind the laws, and behind the institutions, but you have not hidden from the eyes of God, nor from his chosen. We will expose every lie, every cover-up, and every deceitful act. To the American and Guatemalan people, I say rise. Rise with the understanding that each one of us has been called to join this battle. God has sent me to you to ignite your soul with purpose, to fill your hearts with courage. We are not just fighting for justice, we are fighting for the soul of our nations, for the sanctity of childhood, and for a future where our children can grow up knowing that they are safe. For the sake of our children, for the love of our country, for the glory of God, let us ignite this fire of justice and never let it die. Amen. Let's go to war.
Well, did you know that Guatemala is the child kidnapping capital of the world?
They are murdering, they are raping, and they are disappearing thousands of children from Guatemala.
Can't think the Biden crime family is too far away from this one.
Save the Children used to be chaired by none other than Jill Biden.
That's why the Biden administration is so interested in this country.
You could not make up the things that I was able to see.
Antony Blinken and the U.S. State Department have been caught red-handed in a regime change operation that involves blackmail.
Blinken have been putting a lot of pressure on legislators.
And if we stand for democracy anywhere, we have to stand for it everywhere, including in Guatemala.
We also hope that the pressure will bring Iran back to the negotiating table.
Extortion.
Critics say in reality you're seeking a regime change. Is that true?
It's not true.
money laundering,
Congress has given USA an unprecedented amount of money.
rigged elections, and of course, this massive child trafficking operation. Yes, upwards of $800
$1 billion for sex changes in Guatemala.
It's not even our government anymore. It's this
Satanists. I mean, there's no other way to put it right now.
The United States Secret Service has records of American government elites raping kids in Guatemala. Raping kids in Guatemala.
Now that you're able to grasp the enormity of what's at stake, let me share with you a story of a true angel among politicians. The only one who's ever shown a genuine concern by reaching out to me, Maria Porras, the Attorney General of Guatemala. You know, I can't take any credit for it. I honestly think it was all God that led me here. My documentary released a couple weeks ago, and right after it released, I had got it translated into Spanish. And the second that it posted in Spanish, 24 hours later, I was contacted by the Attorney General's office. She asked if I could come to Guatemala to sit down with her team and talk about the amount of children that are being kidnapped out of Guatemala. To all of the citizens of Guatemala who have been misled into thinking that Attorney General Maria Porras is corrupt or some kind of villain, I am here to set the record straight.
The AG Maria Consuelo Porras Argueta.
She stands up. She doesn't care what crime you've committed. You're to be held accountable for those crimes.
She is our leader, you know.
She cleared over 1 million unadjudicated cases when she came in.
She has been under attack like no one in the world, maybe just only President Trump.
She reminds me of being the Trump of Guatemala.
Yeah, because it's the same form of attack in the media.
Thousands of people in Guatemala left highways saying they won't leave until Attorney General Consuelo Porras stands down. You held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk? By the judicial system.
They put her on the angles list. They've tried this holding out their ability to get visas and been put on sanctions lists.
Cutting all the cooperation to the institution.
They've tried to stop her from looking into state corruption cases in Guatemala.
There is a lot of attack.
And then as you start pulling those threads, you just start to really realize how rotted our government really is, and then how pedophilia really is the glue that holds this entire deep state apparatus together.
Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers?
She's fighting against an international web of deceit and crime, risking her life every day to protect the innocent.
We found out that there was a state-sanctioned, a U.S.-sanctioned assassin, the set goal of assassinating both the Attorney General and the Secretary General.
So we have a good leader that believes in God and knows that she is doing the right thing, and she's not going to rest on doing the right thing.
To those who doubt her, I say, wake the fuck up. To fully grasp the depths of this corruption within the United States government, you need to understand how it systemically destroys third world countries, overthrows governments, and wages fifth-generation warfare attacks on vulnerable nations. Here's how US aid fits into this sinister puzzle.
And then there's the fucking propaganda, the mindfuck of calling it US aid.
There's no aid in US aid, by the way. Your brain is being tricked when you see the phrase US aid.
Instead of the United States Agency for International Development, it sounds like it's feeding hungry people.
Right.
Currently under the control of Samantha Powers, one of the most corrupt and vile individuals on this planet.
Ms. Powers, did USAID fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
We did not fund gain-of-function.
That's not the question. The question is, did you fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
Never let a crisis go to waste.
Samantha Powers' net worth increased from 21 to 24 from an estimated 6.7 million to around 30 million.
In those 3 years, her wealth jumped from $6.7 million to a whopping $30 million, leaving many on social media questioning how her net worth made such a significant jump in such a short amount of time.
One of the things that Congress has given USAID is an unprecedented amount of money.
USAID is the linchpin of the deep state, the crucial link that binds the Department of Defense, the State Department, and the CIA in their global manipulation. This isn't about spreading democracy or aid.
Actually, it's like $250 million for transgender animal studies.
Literally mutilating animals.
Yes.
Mutilating animals in demented studies, like the worst thing you could possibly imagine from a horror show.
USAID is effectively a switch player to assist the Pentagon on the national security front, to assist the State Department on the national interest front.
It's really interesting for U.S. citizens to understand that their authorities have been doing this in third world nations.
Holy fuck! The CIA is controlling America's prosecutors!
Now let me prove to you with one of the most recent examples of how the United States government, in coordination with the CIA, USAID and the State Department allegedly manipulated elections in foreign countries.
When USAID shows up anywhere in the world, it is generally followed by an attempt at regime change or a coup or some other way of undermining a government.
Let's start with Brazil. You guys remember in 2022 when there was that major shortage of semiconductors and the cost of everything that had one went through the roof?
Put your arms around how big a problem the shortage of semiconductors is right now.
So America and Brazil are becoming more and more like each other with each passing year. And that, of course, means elections filled with suspicious behavior.
We pull a lot of tricks in order, around that. And you're going to find a lot more of that when you look into the role of unions like the National Alliance for Democracy Solidarity Center.
I guess we underestimated how evil and how deceitful these people can be.
We literally pulled favors with Taiwan, this is reported in the Financial Times, in order to get them the semiconductor chips to build the voting machines against Bolsonaro's wishes.
100% of our ballots are electronic. Our whole electoral system is electronic, is digital. And that's why we can't know what really happened. Everything happens inside chips and binary system and software.
Now I need to quote Mike Benz here. And he asked the question, have any of you guys ever flown to Brazil? Because it ain't cheap. What about flying to Brazil with 50 of your CIA homies? Yeah, once a week, twice on weekends? Well, yeah, that's exactly what William Burns did. All of it paid for with your tax dollars.
We're saying the head of the CIA, the head of the military, were running semiconductor chips just so that they can make voting machines that the elected head of state doesn't want. We're funding their, workers' movements through.
So we have a very specific outcome that we want.
Yes.
And then we also make sure that they use voting machines that we provide.
I'm not even weighing into the voting machine issue, except to say that it's very strange.
But that's not all. If we swing over to foreignpolicy.com, we can see an article titled, How U.S. Pressure Helps Save Brazil's Democracy. The article started with, and I quote, 2 weeks ago, Brazil's federal police launched a high-profile raid against former President Bolsonaro and more than 10 of his allies, including Brazil's former Navy chief, National Security Advisor, and Minister of Defense and Justice authorities, accused the group of plotting a potential coup after Bolsonaro's failed 2022 election bid. Now, let me remind you, the election hadn't even taken place yet, and you now have the US military telling the president of Brazil, don't even think about questioning the results of the upcoming election that is going to take place 5 months from now?
CEP's core partner, IFES, this is basically the election strengthening, teaming up directly with Brazil's TSE court. That is the censorship court that seized X's, that shut down X, and that seized Starlink's assets, and that effectively criminalized the speech of virtually any significant pro-Bolsonaro voice in Brazil.
I can't say what happened to the elections here in Brazil. If I pronounce what I really believe happened here in Brazil, and this is not an exaggeration, I will be arrested.
The whole thing was a USA Truman show taking over the judiciary, or at least substantially influencing and tilted to take out their political enemy, Bolsonaro, the whole way down.
Now, just in case you're curious about the election result in Brazil, let me share this gem from Tucker Carlson when he was on Fox News.
You would hate to think that what's happening here is a version of what is happening tonight in Brazil. According to official tallies, a convicted criminal and avowed socialist called Lula da Silva beat the incumbent president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, by a narrow margin this weekend. And yet millions of Brazilians, millions, don't believe that's what actually happened. Bolsonaro himself has not conceded. There are protests all over Brazil right now. You're seeing some of them on your screen right now. There are questions about whether all the ballots had been counted, why so many were thrown out, millions, and whether election laws were violated in the process.
Workers' Party here, PT, which is Lula's party, was responsible for the biggest corruption scheme in the history of the world. I'm not talking just about Brazil, okay? In the history of the world, financed by drug dealers all over the world, destroyed our economy, bought our mainstream media. That's why they are so eager to defend this criminal.
So we can't render judgment on those questions. But if you care about democracy, if you think the process is essential, then you would look into those allegations. Anything less is not democracy. The Biden administration has been interfering in the elections in Brazil, period.
If you have watched my previous film, Operation Amber Alert, or you follow my journey, you are aware by now that these projects are entirely self-funded. After releasing What is Treason #Trafficked with J.J. Carroll and initially putting it behind a paywall, I realized that this approach wasn't just un-American. It was counterproductive to our cause. To generate enough public outrage, at least 10 million people need to see this documentary. That's why I've decided to fund the Operation Amber Alert series myself. No partners, no sponsors, no strings attached. But this means I'm 100% resilient on your support to keep this operation going. At the time of filming this documentary, my Give, Send, Go campaign has raised around $17,000 since the premiere of my first Operation Amber Alert film on November 25th. That means that I've taken about a $7,000 loss to bring this story to light. People often question why I place #traffic behind a paywall. Now you understand that I can't keep producing these films if I'm hemorrhaging thousands of dollars. I had to leave my position at LFA TV, which means the only income I have now comes from the $250 I earn monthly on X and the $250 from monthly supporters. Every dollar is a testament to our collective mission to expose the truth. Imagine if you could, skipping just one cup of coffee. The small sacrifice could be fuel for our fight for justice. By becoming a paid subscriber on X or Rumble, you are not just supporting a cause, you are joining a movement. If we can rally 3,000 hearts to contribute $5 each a month, together, we can release a new documentary every 60 days. You're not just donating, you're becoming a vital part of something much greater than ourselves. A beacon of hope and change in a world that desperately needs it. You can donate directly by going to my Give, Send, Go at givesendgo.com/Operation Amber Alert, or head over to X at Ryan Matta Media and click the subscribe button to become a monthly supporter. Alternatively, you can click the money icon to see other donation options as well, which include my favorite, Bitcoin. Every little bit helps, and together we can shine a light where darkness has prevailed for far too long. God bless you. If an action resembles a regime change, if it's funded like one, and if it's being pushed by the political insiders in Washington, D.C., then you can be certain it's indeed a regime change.
Democracy is the best way to actually deliver concrete results for our people.
It's infuriating that we have unelected bureaucrats like Anthony Blinken jetting around on a private military jet preaching to us about democracy when America isn't even a gosh damn democracy. Neither is Guatemala. It's a republic. Still not convinced, Guatemala? Why don't I lay it out for you? In the last 10 years alone, these are 10 countries where US aid or the CIA either engineered a coup or were balls deep in a regime change. Venezuela, 2019.
In 2019, there was another coup attempt in Venezuela, but a different playbook, not as violent as 2017. This was with Juan Guaido. You probably remember in February, the US declared that Juan Guaido is the so-called interim president of Venezuela. And the US and Canada had been working with a series of countries, about 30 countries, to recognize Juan Guaido that week.
Opposition leader Juan Guaido proclaimed himself as interim president earlier this year and has the backing of more than 50 countries, including the United States.
The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, revealed that the fugitive from the Venezuelan justice, Juan Guaido, received more than $500 million from the United States Agency for International Development.
You see the chart here on the screen, Guatemala? That is what US aid and the US government does to a nation. They destabilize the nation's currency. The regime change doesn't happen overnight. They build into it. And then after they've radicalized enough citizens, they attack.
That democracy is the best way to actually deliver concrete results for our people.
Cuba, 2014.
For example, you want to pull up the Wikipedia of Zunzanillo when
U.S. Agency for International Development tried to do in Cuba with Zunzanillo, a Twitter-style social media platform secretly controlled by the U.S. government.
Once they had accumulated about 100,000 users, they would start to feed them in the algorithm messaging to make them want to overthrow their government and form smart mobs to bring a Cuban spring to Cuba.
How about Bolivia, 2019? Following the ousting of President Evo Morales, there were accusations that US aid had been involved in funding opposition groups and social movements that led to the political instability and eventually the coup.
Quiero informarles, hemos decidido expulsar a USAID de Bolivia. Se va USAID de Bolivia.
Weeks of mass protests and pressures from the military has led Bolivia's President Evo Morales to resign. These protests started after Morales was re-elected on October 20th with just enough votes to avoid a runoff against his opposition.
That democracy is the best way to actually deliver concrete results for our people. Through holding free and fair elections.
Haiti, 2015. US aid accused of funding the opposition in 2015 Haitian elections. which some claim led to the election coup that installed Jovenel Moïse as president.
The government's Central Unit of Financial Intelligence says Moïse allegedly laundered $5 million through suspicious money transfers.
What makes democracy unique? Why it's worth fighting for.
And of course, I'm sure it's just a coincidence that, US aid was funding the Semilla party. Nothing to see here, Guatemala. Oh, speaking of Guatemala, how about 2015? US aid was alleged to have supported efforts leading to the resignation and the arrest of President Otto Perez Molina, although this was framed as part of a broader anti-corruption effort.
The situation in Guatemala remains tense as electoral monitoring groups working in the country have reported widespread violence. Now activists have gathered outside the nation's Supreme Court to express their anger over the electoral process.
Now, Guatemala, I'm not saying that this president was not corrupt and you guys didn't want him out of office. What I am saying is that our government has mastered the art of manipulation. They once convinced us that President Trump was peeing on hookers.
And that the Russians had compromising videos of Donald Trump watching prostitutes urinate on a bed in the Moscow Ritz-Carlton presidential suite.
Remember, that's the dossier that talked about Trump at a Ritz-Carlton in Moscow with 2 prostitutes urinating on his bed?
They also went as far to convince half of the country that on January 6th, President Trump led a coup or tried to stage an insurrection. It was all a lie.
He tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. He refused to accept the results of an election. Democracy, government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Ecuador, 2015. Accusations emerged that U.S. aid, along with other U.S. agencies, were involved in funding indigenous groups like CONAIN, which called for an uprising against President Rafael Correa.
Government supporters surrounded the presidential offices to block what Correa said could become a coup attempt as protesters clashed with police. Demonstrators have taken to the streets of Ecuador to protest the president's moves to seek a 4th term.
What we stand for around the globe as a democracy.
Argentina, 2015. There were claims that U.S. aid's involvement in the political scenario leading to the election of Mauricio Marci.
The government of Argentina has accused the U.S. of being behind the opposition demonstrations protesting the result of recent local elections.
And as a global community for democracy, we have to stand up for the values that unite us.
Georgia, 2023. The Georgian government claimed that U.S. aid was contributing funds to coup preparation through its support of civil society organizations, particularly after a training session by Canvas, which was alleged to promote revolutionary activities.
The so-called government, because the elections were rigged completely, there was a systematic stealing of the elections.
The Prime Minister of Georgia accused USAID of planning color revolutions in the country as well as interfering in its electoral decisions.
The parliament is not valid and the government neither.
The USAID was involved in the planning and implementation of revolution processes. There is concrete evidence of this, including video evidence.
In almost every corner of the globe, democracy is under threat.
And last but not least, we're going to fully unpack one of these regime changes. Let's talk about Nicaragua 2021.
And the document spells out very explicitly the plan for the U.S. coup operation in Nicaragua. The most important mission goal, which is economics, according to the USAID document, they say that would include transition to a rules-based market economy based on the protection of private property rights. They want to overthrow the democratically elected socialist government. It doesn't ensure protection of private property rights to them. And they want to install a neoliberal regime that will privatize state assets. It's hidden with all this PR speak, but behind the PR jargon and euphemisms like transition, this is a pretty bald-faced plan for a coup.
To try to make our democracies a little bit healthier, a little bit more prosperous, a little bit more inclusive.
Now, let me show you what went down in Nicaragua so you can see how badly this will end for you if you continue to support organizations that are being funded by U.S. aid.
Nicaragua has released more than 200 attempted coup plotters from jail. They had tried to overthrow the national government back in 2018 in what was believed to be a U.S.-funded operation.
The 2018 coup attempt is really for Nicaraguans, it is a horrifying experience just to even recall.
American government agencies such as USAID provided funding for the insurgency. Hundreds of people were killed at the time in chaotic scenes as armed gangs attempted to storm the presidential palace with apparent plans to kill the head of state.
The United States was the main sponsor of the violent, very right-wing elements that tried to overthrow Nicaragua's democratically elected government.
If we believed in democracy and human rights, we would be supporting the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and the rebels in El Salvador, and we're doing the opposite.
I've seen people break out in tears. It's just such a traumatic experience because they were hunted down.
And once again, our leaders are flatly lying about the truth.
Let me be crystal clear here. These organizations will stop at nothing. Not even at the brink of collapsing your entire country or igniting a civil war.
There are these right-wing death squads, and they're not even just death squads, they're just violent gangs.
They're the most bloodthirsty, cruelest terrorists that the CIA has perhaps ever dealt with.
So there are very many victims of this violent coup attempt in 2018, and we have documents showing that many of the leaders involved in this coup attempt were funded by the US government. I personally have interviewed a man who was a security guard at the mayor's office in the city of Masaya, and he was tortured by these coup plotters, and he lost one of his arms.
You know your nation is in the crosshairs of a regime change operation the moment that you hear the phrase, "We seek to restore democracy."
Ben, we constantly hear from U.S. media and the State Department that U.S. policy in Nicaragua seeks to restore democracy.
It's just the simple issue of democracy, as there was no democratic process. Then when they scheduled elections, spokespeople began to say they were fraudulent. All of the international observers documented that these elections were more democratic than the United States elections.
One of the co-founders of the NED, Alan Weinstein, told the Washington Post that it was created to do basically what the CIA had done previously, but to do it out more overtly in the open. And all of these groups, it's like alphabet soup, right? You just take democracy, international, national, development, and you just throw them all together and you can get the kind of alphabet soup. But it essentially says that it promotes democracy, but it advances U.S. foreign policy interests and targets foreign countries for regime change.
Wake up, Guatemala. When the left doesn't get their way, they resort to violence.
14-year-old girls who've been gang raped and then their heads cut off and stuck on posts in front of the village to terrorize people.
The United States in the 1980s, through the CIA, armed and trained terrorists, the Contras. They burned down schools and hospitals, according to one of their former leaders.
Going into villages, the family is asleep, hauling out the father and forcing the family to watch while he's alive, while you castrate him and stick him full of holes, and then stick a grenade in his mouth and pull the pin, with his family forced to watch.
That's why Nicaragua, Sandinista Nicaragua, had to be destroyed.
Exactly. They were a bad example because any movement that comes to power with the idea of providing for all the people and of escaping the control of the United States and its economy, let's say the corporations and so forth, then that is bad news here in the United States in the upper circles of power.
Let me break down how these operations are conducted. This will prepare you for the investigation into how the 2023 election was manipulated and the key roles that people like Secretary Anthony Blinken and our State Department, USAID, and the CIA all play in this regime change operation. So this is very important, Guatemala. In order for you to understand how these criminals operate, I need you to start thinking like one of these criminals. But in order to think like one of them, you need to have an understanding of how their operations work, big picture. So I want to walk you through these steps of a regime change, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to break them down one more time in a different light so you can understand how it's happening in your country. Now, number one, we want to talk about funding opposition in civil societies.
The U.S. government needs to capacity build these counter-misinformation institutions in civil society because the government has the money and the resources, but not the credibility. Civil society organizations, the universities, the NGOs, they've got the credibility, but not the money. So that's part of what they're saying here with the role of this civil society is the government can't be seen as telling everyone to do all of this censorship because that's authoritarian. That would look not credible. That would look authoritarian for the government to do. So we've got the muscle and the money, but not the credibility. Our cutout organizations have the credibility, but not the money and the muscle, so we're going to give them the money and the muscle.
Number 2 is your media and propaganda.
Same goes for nearly 1,000 news networks in more than 30 different countries that were getting huge handouts from USAID, 268 million US tax dollars.
The USAID is giving out examples of advertiser outreach, how to pressure them in order to do this.
If USAID is in your country and the amount of money that's behind it and seeing how your media is treating you, do you think your citizens understand that that media is owned by and controlled by the United States government and they're doing this to try to destroy your country?
No, I don't think that they understand that, you know. We understand that now because we have been a target of that, you know, and my kid understands that because they took his visa also, you know. The people here in Guatemala doesn't have a clue of that. When you start to talk about that, they don't get it, you know, because they say, no, you are a bad person, so what you are saying is not true.
This is our government funded by our tax dollars telling foreign governments that they should regulate ad networks to kill the ad revenue of U.S. social media websites and U.S. news entities, like has been caught up in the advertiser database at state and USAID under the Biden administration.
Number 3 is training and education programs.
USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, were both instruments of subversion designed to produce color revolutions.
For example, the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, often in cooperation with USAID, has been involved in such programs.
The National Endowment for Democracy's in-house journal called the Journal of Democracy. Again, the NED is this CIA front group.
You can't fix them. These institutions are rotten to the core.
The New York Times reported the CIA gets a copy of every grant that they make. Their own founders say that that the CIA got in trouble for sponsoring pro-democracy groups around the world in the 1960s, and that's why we don't do it anymore, and that's why the National Endowment was created.
Number 4, election interference.
Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening. You know, this has been a U.S. government State Department program, which is co-funded and largely funded by USAID, in order to help foreign countries develop more robust election infrastructure.
We accuse other nations of meddling all the time, but as much as we want to project an image of our nation as a shining beacon of truth and freedom, we are the worst offender when it comes to meddling in foreign affairs.
And to make sure their own internal political systems are strengthened democratically, which effectively means to make sure they're more of a vassal of the U.S. State Department so that anything that happens in that country's internal politics do not undermine the State Department's vision for the development of that region.
And that's exactly how they crush you. If you question the election, you're anti-democratic, you're an election denier.
Republican election deniers. Election denier. Election deniers.
And they make up all these names and this terminology and they use the mainstream media. Ignore their words, Guatemala. These people are weak. Number 5, economic pressure.
USAID is going to swoop in, along with other NGOs, to establish job fairs near the protest areas, so that when these racially inflamed African workers take to the streets, they don't need to worry about losing their careers at those companies they just went on strike at, because they're going to be on U.S. taxpayer dime, baby.
We have press releases from the Pentagon proving that USAID and the Pentagon were working together, along with the State Department, to try to force through these so-called aid convoys across the bridge into Venezuela. The nation said this is not humanitarian aid because it's extremely political.
That Barack Obama was using USAID to pretend to send aid overseas, but was actually laundering it to train Rena riots instead.
Number 6, support for protests and demonstrations. This has been documented in places like Ukraine during the Maidan protest, where the U.S. funds supported various NGOs involved. And yes, in 2014, Victoria Nuland staged a coup and overthrew the government of Ukraine.
Now, she's been working on this war for decades. She's the same woman who engineered the war with Russia by supporting the opposition government. And she didn't want that. She wanted a war.
The U.S. did effectively January 6th, the Yanukovych government out of power in 2014. I mean, we literally had our Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasian Affairs Victoria Nuland handing out cookies and water bottles to violent street protesters as they surrounded the Parliament building and ran the democratically elected government out of office.
Her and Jeffrey Pyatt were on a leaked phone call discussing this evil plot, and she said,
Great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, the EU.
Because she knew the EU wouldn't exactly want a war between Ukraine and Russia.
And then Joe Biden held a press conference where he got the prosecutor fired who was investigating his son.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
We personally intervened. It was Joe Biden at the Council on Foreign Relations who bragged about if Ukraine wanted their $1 billion in assistance, they had to fire the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma.
Number 7, legal or judicial support. Backing judicial reform or legal actions against government officials, often under the banner of anti-corruption, which can be used to weaken the current regime's grip on power. What party in Guatemala has been running on their anti-corruption campaign?
United States announcing visa restrictions on nearly 300 Guatemalan citizens. These restrictions come in response to what the U.S. Department of State describes as anti-democratic actions by officials and other actors accused of attempting to annul the election won by President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. The visa restrictions target over 100 members of the Guatemalan Congress, private sector representatives, and their family members, all accused of undermining democracy and the rule of law.
Number 8, strategic partnerships. Forming alliances with influential local figures or factions who might be persuaded to support or not resist a change in government. That one's very important.
We call them polytalkers here. They're not defending democracy. They're misinforming people, but they don't know how to speak. They don't know how to defend a legal point.
In 1948, when we established the secrecy doctrine that we now live under, and all these NGOs work under this cover effectively, because of their sponsoring organizations, USAID or CIA or state. But at the time, what he said, we need to replicate this everywhere. We need to create a capacity to do black propaganda, to do economic sabotage, demolition. There's a whole list of what's authorized under NSC 10-2.
And now let's talk about the key steps that you want to hypothetically consider. And this is where you really start to think like one of these criminals. Let's talk about our assessment, because this is how they overlay the big picture. They want to understand the political landscape, the vulnerabilities of the current regime, public sentiment.
We organized secret armies and directed them to fight in just about every continent in the world.
And key players within the opposition.
We encouraged ethnic minorities to rise up and fight.
And this is where you might see an operation like the CCG go in and start arresting successful businessmen in Guatemala who are donating to a political opponent's campaign, building networks, establishing or enhancing networks with influential locals, including opposition leaders, journalists, and society leaders. This is how USAID has been operating in your country for the last 50 years. Their network is massive. So they build these networks, they establish or enhance networks with influential locals, including opposition leaders, journalists, and civil society leaders. Now, program implementation. This is kind of a tricky one, but when you design and implement a program, you need to do it subtly to shift public opinion, support oppositions, and highlight government failures. And they do this with their media strategy.
The people that go to Twitter and defend democracy, they only say, we are going here defending democracy, and they are not defending anything. They're just defending their check at the end of the day.
And make it look like everybody's like that.
Because local media gets propaganda from the government.
This pay-to-play army of online activists can swiftly divert attention from any negative press about your candidate, and they can also amplify attacks on your opposition.
Right now, if you go to all the media and all the websites and you look for Maria Consuelo Porras Argueta, you are going to see a lot of bad media.
Now, your economic strategy is really key, right? So you got to influence economic policies or conditions through aid that could either bolster opposition or highlight government mismanagement. And what they mean there is when you have an organization like USAID, who has had access to $797 million over the last 4 years, when you're able to pump that much money into businesses, into media outlets, into the political landscape, or literally move markets, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And when they print money out of thin air, it devalues the wealth of everybody. They call it inflation, but most people that are not educated and don't understand what that means. That means your government's stealing from you. Crisis management. You need to be prepared to manage, or here you go, exploit a crisis.
Samantha Power says she's the war criminal who's lied about the Palestinians, the Syrian war, Ukraine. Now she's back doing it again.
And you also find that millions of dollars of that aid was actually cash. Which NGOs and UN agencies received that money?
Again, I'd want to go through and give you the proper breakdown, but the partners that we rely on. Never let a crisis go to waste.
And I think it's, once again, you have to look at the people that he picked for cabinet posts who were involved in all of this.
That they were determined to ensure that all of Trump's picks this time around would follow, rather than subvert his vision as laid out in the campaign.
Anybody remember Mark Rubio being in support of this new illegitimate regime? I thought he was supposed to be on our side.
And these people were indistinguishable from their predecessors. I don't know how you separate Rubio from Blinken.
Rubio sounded like the standard GOP warmonger he has been for years.
Because the conduct of our foreign policy belongs to the President of the United States and the executive branch, not some judge.
I just don't see much difference. I don't see much evidence for it.
So we will conduct foreign policy appropriately if we need to, but I'll never discuss it.
So I think Rubio is just as enthusiastic about bombing Iran and suppressing and killing and murdering people in Gaza and Lebanon and anywhere else.
That's how foreign policy works.
And if we stand for democracy anywhere, we have to stand for it everywhere.
And don't go anywhere, Guatemala, because we're going to unpack exactly all of these scumbags who are against you and working for the deep state in America to help carry out this regime change. And I promise you, some of the minds might surprise a few of you.
It has been a hard year for us dealing with these things, these attacks, because they have been attacking all along and through every institution that we have. I'm not going to say that our system of government was perfect, but it's been the most corrupt right now.
As Americans, we know this firsthand because we experienced it in the 2020 election.
First, you said on your first day of office you were going to pardon January 6 defendants. Are you planning to pardon those who were charged with violent offenses?
I guess 24 or 28 people came now from the FBI. People that were doing some bad things weren't prosecuted, and people that didn't even walk into the building are in jail right now.
Now in the U.S., a president gets to pick their attorney general when they win the election. Fortunately for you, Guatemala, Maria Perez holds that position. Otherwise, your country would be teetering on the edge of a civil war. If he were to put pressure on the attorney general for the election fraud, and that would remove her, that would also remove her from the Save the Children case, correct?
Yeah, of course. They don't like her to take these complaints.
The AG, which she has been really dealing with these assholes, she doesn't have a visa right now. Her whole team doesn't have a visa right now. The U.S. government took their visas because they have been attacking democracy, as the U.S. government says.
There is a document purportedly from the State Department circulating on social media that's an outline how to prevent the reappointment of Consuelo Porras as Attorney General. Can you confirm its authenticity? And then he said, I hope not, because if it's authentic, then the State Department is meddling, it's committing a crime. It shouldn't be doing it.
Your viewers need to know that the U.S. government has been installing pressure here in Guatemala for us to hush.
And finally, let's start to address the election fraud, which appears to be directly correlated with how Guatemala has become the child kidnapping capital of the world. In this Guatemalan election, we have 3 different types of fraud that took place. We are going to break down each one of them one by one. Number 1 was the creation of the Semilla Party.
So they didn't have enough signatures to be considered a political party.
Number 2 was the purchasing of the CIA-backed election machines.
They bought a system which is called the TEREP. It's a system that counts votes, and at the end of the day, all that information stays in a cloud.
And number 3 was the fraud that took place during the election itself.
We have received a complaint of fraud here in Guatemala, and when we started to make the first investigations of this complaint, they started to attack us again, you know.
The result that we have at the end of the day, it didn't match with predictions, it didn't match with anything. The people that are in power right now were on the 8th place.
Let's start with number 1, creating a political party.
They needed 22,671 people to validate that they wanted that political party to be inscribed in the Electoral College.
Now, before we start this next part, I want you guys to understand that I speak English, and a lot of these things I've transcribed from Spanish. So bear with me as the terminology might be slightly different, but I did this so that Americans that watch this can see and understand how things that work here.
They needed 22,671 signatures, so they didn't have enough signatures to be considered a political party.
Now, collecting these signatures involves more than just names. Additional details are required to safeguard against fraud. For instance, each signature on the form that you're seeing on the screen here must include the individual's ID number, the name of the city, the name of the state, the date of signing, the signer's first and last name, and their signature. In Guatemala, the ID number functions similarly to a driver's license number, or maybe a social security number in the US. It's a unique identifier for each citizen, openly used when signing official documents. Now, let me break down what this investigation uncovered. Out of the 25,111 signatures that the Semilla Party collected, 8,121 were fraudulent. That means that 32.3% of the total signatures were classified as void, and the party only received 16,990 valid signatures. That is 5,681 signatures short of the required 22,671 required by law to create a political party.
And at the end of the day, 8,121 signatures were invented, were duplicates.
Here's the breakdown. 5,542 were non-existing people in the public registry. These are fake, made-up individuals that do not exist in real life. There were 2,394 instances where the information provided did not match official records. For example, the name doesn't match the ID number. Think of an ID number like a driver's license. The ID number provided does not match the name it's supposed to belong to. 132 were duplicates, meaning the same person's signature and information was used twice. 40 signatures were from people who were already dead, meaning at the time they signed this document to allegedly support this political party, they were already dead. 13 complaints were filed by individuals that seen this ballot and claimed that they never signed it. So somebody forged their signature.
And an individual who appeared, he didn't sign anything, and he, made all this information publicly. He sent it to the Ministerio Público, which is our AG's office. He exposed that his signature was used to build this political party. On December 2023, the 8th of December, she revealed this information, that they didn't have the signatures needed to be considered a political party.
And then with the backing of our corrupt State Department in November of 2024, of course, Congress decides to pass a law against organized crime. Specifically, this reform involved changes to Article 82 of the law.
That was the first step, and it was visible that the U.S. government was involved in this thing.
With this reform, the suspension of the Semilla Party was revoked.
Basically, they got these corrupt politicians to change a law that would actually make it not illegal, or the party wouldn't be suspended. Basically, they would still be able to hold their power even if the party was created fraudulently. There would basically be no ramifications or consequences for creating the fraudulent party.
But here's the punchline, America.
This is the point where these guys went nuts. So they changed the law so that they thought actually that this changing of the law, this reform, actually would benefit them. But actually the law, as you said right now, is not retroactive, so it doesn't apply to them.
And you can see this post by my man and my homie, Diego. Diego goes by @DSA GASTUMEV over on X. Please follow this man. If you are a Guatemalan patriot, there is one man who's putting it all on the line to fight to save your country, and it's this man right here, Diego. I would pronounce your last name, but I'm going to butcher it. I appreciate you, my man. Which listed 127 of these corrupt politicians who voted in favor of this pro-corruption bill. We have to celebrate the small wins when we get them. On November 27th of 2024, Judge Freddie Orellana, if I'm saying that right, issued an order to cancel the legal registration of the Semilla party.
Yeah, the ruling came on November 27th, and it was notified to Congress and to the Electoral College on November 28, 2024. And on that date, Citizens Registry, which is part of the Electoral College structure, they officially canceled this political party.
Now, unfortunately, these politicians are going to still remain in power, kind of temporarily, unless they're actually found guilty of other crimes, which we can assume that almost all of them are. Now let's go over to the official website, which is trep.gt. You will see that the site is in Spanish. Sometimes it won't translate to English, so I would suggest using Google Chrome. In the top right corner of your screen, next to the browser extension, you will see 3 dots. Click those 3 dots and scroll down until you see the translate button. On the bottom left of the page, we're going to click the tab that says results first round. If the website did not translate, you're going to click this button right here, and you should see the next page open in English. Next, we are going to look at the top right of our screen, where you'll see a little blue box titled Results by Polling Station. We are going to put in number 84, then we are going to click Consult. When the next page opens, we're going to scroll down to the voting detail by table page, and we're going to click the blue box that says C. This will immediately open up the tally sheet, also known as document number 4, which is for the president and VP election. In America, we would call document number 4 a election result certificate. So moving forward, we're just going to refer to this document as a certificate. And the first thing we notice is that this one's white. Why is it white?
This one's actually the original. As you can see, it's filled in with ink, blue ink, so it should be the original.
In Guatemalan elections, they have a checks and balances system that's set up to prevent fraud. And by original, Diego means that their tabulators are on carbon paper, right? There's 3 copies. The top copy is white, the second copy is yellow, and the last copy is blue. Now, this is one of the most important and crucial steps, which is called the seal or stamping of the certificate.
I just want you to search for a stamp. If you can
There's
search
no
for
stamp.
There is no stamp.
But before the documents can be sealed, it must be completed according to the standards set by election law.
23,000 tables, electoral tables. In each table, you have approximately like 5 or 6 people for each table, handling the table, president, the secretary, and all the vocals and every other people. And also you have vocals from each of the political parties that were participating. Mainly, you can imagine that it was transparent.
There are 14 different standards required by Guatemalan election laws, which include number 1, complete name and tablet number, number 2, ID number, number 3, time of closing of the polls, number 4, number of votes in a specific table, number 5, results by each political party participating, number 6 is total valid votes, number 7 is total null votes, number 8 is blank votes, number 9 is the total properly emitted votes, total valid votes in America as we'd call it, number 10, total valid votes, number 11, total votes including invalid or your grand total, number 12 is total of challenge votes, number 13 is ballots received on the opening of the table and total amount of ballots that were not used. Number 14 is signatures and stamping of the certificate. Now, people might argue that I've just grabbed a single document, so let's broaden the scope by looking at a few more examples. We'll examine ballot number 223, number 466, and number 524. If you'd like further confirmation of this fraud, you can refer to the press conference held by the Attorney General's office on December 8th of 2023, where prosecutors presented evidence that all original certificates were missing the certification stamp. Let's discuss the signing of these certificates by the 3 members at each election table. To keep it straightforward, we'll look at certificate number 1. If you examine the right side of this document, you'll notice that only 2 signatures are present. the signature of the vocal is missing. This is a standard procedure and one of the 14 requirements to properly certify a document. Consequently, this document would be considered null or void or fraudulent. You might think this is an isolated incident, but let's take a look at certificate number 132, where all 3 signatures are absent. And we can take a look at certificate 134, again, missing a signature along with the ID number, full name, and the vocal signature. Another similar case is document number 127, where you can see that the employees wrote their names instead of signing the document. While this might seem minor, it still does not adhere to proper election laws. Yet again, this ballot would be considered void. Next, let's take a look at the certificate for total votes. If we examine ballot number 10, you'll see that the number 238 is in the top left corner, indicating the total number of citizens who voted. However, in the middle of the document where it states total votes, the number is 237. These numbers have to match. Even though it is just one vote off, this is a discrepancy that renders the document void. Now let's examine ballot number 94. At first glance, it's clear this ballot is a mess. The first issue I want to highlight is the original signature. It's signed in blue ink, which indicates that this document was signed after the white carbon copy was removed. This suggests that the document could and should be considered altered, since we cannot verify whether the white copy was ever signed. Next, I want to point out the Guatemalan election law requires every box to be filled out. On this document, look at row 23, 28, 34, 37, 31, and 35. They're all left blank. Now let's look at rows 38 and 16. You can see they were supposed to transfer information from row 38 to row 16. To make this type of change, the election officials are required by law to send the entire certificate to the Department Electoral College authorities for certification and correction of the mistake. Instead, what they did is they wrote on the document itself, where you can see the word testigo. This was an elected official's attempt to correct their error, but this action violates Guatemalan election laws. The last piece of evidence I want to highlight is the total votes. If you look at the middle row towards the bottom, you will see 2 numbers, 400 and 168. Now initially, they wrote 397. Here's what this number signifies. 400 is the total number of ballots or certificates that were provided at the beginning of the election to that specific table. 168 was the number of unused ballots left over at the end of the election. If you subtract 168 from 400, you get 232. But that number does not match the recorded total votes of 229. This discrepancy means that 3 ballots are unaccounted for. There's further confirmation of this error where you can see that they crossed out number 397, indicating that they went back, they double counted, and they were certain that when they started this election, they received a total of 400 certificates. Now let's return back to the main page so you can access what they call the global data set so that you can do your own investigation. If we click the back button and we go back to the primary election results for 2023 page, and in the top right corner, you'll see the database button. Once the next page loads, on the left side, there's going to be a download button. Click the download button. Now let's open this Excel spreadsheet and let's take a look at column AQ. If we scroll down to row 42, you'll notice this row is blank with no comment, indicating that there was no issue with this ballot and that it was filled out or completed correctly. Now, however, if you see any comment in row AQ, it means that the ballot should be considered void. You'll find that almost every ballot has a comment. So let's break down these statistics. 21,047 of these certificates had missing data. 2,070, the math didn't add up. 133 tables did not open, so the polling location was closed, which means it was too dangerous or violent in that area, so the polling location could not open. AKA, thank you USAID for your Rena riots. 74 were considered as ineligible. 82 of them were not counted, meaning the system did not have any information. This data indicates that out of all 24,427 certificates, only 1,021 are considered valid. meaning 95.82% of the ballots used to certify this election were fraudulent. Now, according to Guatemalan election laws, Article 235, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal can declare the nullification of an election in any municipality. This can be requested by any political party, any political organization, or directly by the Electoral Tribunal if an annulment has been declared in more than 1/3 of the votes received. This implies that the Electoral Tribunal should have annulled the election due to the 95.82% of invalid votes. However, the Electoral Tribunal itself is under investigation for certifying this fraudulent election.
Attorney General of Guatemala has exclusive authority over electoral crimes. So she receives complaints.
There was a complaint against the persons that work in the electoral court, complaint of fraud in the last elections.
Within the first 5 days after the election, the AG received over 1,000 fraudulent complaints. By law, this must be reviewed.
And if they find that there's violation of law, then they have to keep going.
But even if the AG finds sufficient evidence, the AG cannot immediately open an investigation due to the involvement of the Electoral Tribunal.
The Ministerio Público went to a hearing, put their positions, and with that hearing they took a decision. 108 persons in the Congress of Guatemala said that yes, Ministerio Público is allowed to investigate these magistrates.
They were investigated because of they bought this trap system, the electoral system. So they were being investigated because of that. And they actually, the system, the calculator, as they mention it, the calculator cost $20 million, your bucks.
Because the 5 persons that are magistrates in the electoral authority, 4 are under investigation of Ministerio Público and are separated of their offices.
We're diving into 5th generation warfare, and it all ties back to this anti-democratic prick, Anthony Blinken, whose dirty deeds started back in 2021 when the AG got too close to exposing these scumbags. Blinken, acting like the modern-day Gestapo, wasn't about to let that happen.
But I can tell you this, the United States has made corruption in Guatemala much, much worse than it ever was.
On July 1st of 2021, the U.S. State Department, in its infinite wisdom, launched what they call the Engel List.
She investigates. State Department goes nuts. United States Northern Triangle Enhanced Engagement Act, so-called Engel List, because Elliot Engel was the chairman of the committee, and the law created the sanctions. They call them Section 353 sanctions. In Guatemala, it became known as the Engel List. That's what they sanctioned control upon us under that.
Does that sound familiar, America? It should, because just like when Obama, in his sanctimonious glory, signed the Magnitsky Act into law back in December of 2012.
And they took their visas away throughout this Magnitsky clause in the U.S.
Gross violation of human rights, torture, cruel and inhumane treatment, indefinite detention. That's what we would put in the bill, is the actual definition. These are the words of the mostly Democrats who wrote the bill, the Magnitsky Act.
Because they said that they participated in illegal things that attempted democracy here in Guatemala.
By 2016, they expanded into the Global Magnitsky Act, giving the U.S. the right to screw over any foreign officials worldwide for human rights violations or corruption.
What they're trying to do is take the Magnitsky Act and drive an enormous hole in it that you can push anything through and do sanctions on anybody, anywhere in the world, based on a vague, ambiguous, and vast definition that is not specific.
This was never about justice or accountability. It was about the U.S. dictating terms to the world like the global overlords they are. Now, let me explain how this game is really played. Date, July 23rd of 2021.
This was a very strong attack since 2021 because she decided to fire a person that was in charge of the FESI unit.
Now on July 23rd of 2021, this event is confirmed by multiple sources, including news reports and official statements. 2 days after,
when she fired that guy, this guy was actually awarded a day after by Blinken, the anti-corruption board. This was a day after they fired him from Guatemala.
The Attorney General slapped an arrest warrant on him. Well, now that he's got an open criminal investigation into him, he's living like a fugitive in DC, and he's begging for political asylum from the very government that's supposedly upholding the law and enforcing democracy.
He has been in the U.S. since, because right now he's a fugitive. He's not an exile.
By September 3rd of 2021, there was at least one arrest warrant for obstruction of justice and breach of duties.
Well, when she took that decision, they started to say that this Ministerio Público was in favor of corruption, but she fired this person because he was working in a manner that was very difficult to allow.
I mean, Juan Francisco Sandoval was an agent of the State Department. And I'll bet you anything that he committed crimes that were not part of the State Department's agenda, and they had to cover for him.
He now has 45 different complaints, but when you have 45 persons saying that he was doing a bad job, you have to investigate it.
Because they can't prosecute him, because he's committing crimes for them. That's the problem with criminality.
Fast forward to September 21st of 2021, Blinken, in his infinite arrogance, suspends the visa of the Attorney General, and he puts her on the undemocratic and corrupt officials list, claiming that she sabotaged Juan's work.
You can see an interview that Blinken had.
Warren Davidson of Ohio asked Blinken.
You were recently there, and just before your visit, members of the Guatemalan Congress were threatened by our embassy there that they would lose their U.S. visas, and their kids who are studying here would lose their visas to study in America if they didn't support removal of Guatemala's Attorney General.
The words that Representative Davidson used was,
do you think the United States should be manipulating members of a foreign Congress in this manner?
And Blinken's answer was,
Not a question of manipulating members of foreign Congress. It's the fact that in the recent election in Guatemala, there was a very strong attempt made to prevent the democratically elected president of Guatemala from taking office. There was an attempt to disrupt the inauguration of that president. And if we stand for democracy anywhere, we have to stand for it everywhere, including in Guatemala.
In other words, he admitted implicitly that they extorted members of Guatemalan Congress. He said this to the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
By September 12th of 2022, another order captured was issued in connection with a case involving Jose Ruben Zamora.
What they did with Jose Ruben Zamora was a very transparent process. They arrest the guy, they give him a trial. Now, of course, Todd Robinson and Brian Nichols and Anthony Blinken claimed that they were persecuting Zamora because he was a journalist. Well, there's a whole slew of testimony, including by a former member of Congress who was a victim of it. They said this guy is an extortionist. And they caught him red-handed with the money, with the cash money. Arevalo comes in and he goes to visit the guy and he says this guy's a victim of persecution.
Now, let's not forget our history, shall we? Juan worked under the corrupt Attorney General who was installed by our deep state back in 2014, and her name is Thelma Aldana.
She has been protected by the U.S. government. She has different processes, legal processes here in Guatemala opened, and she is out of this country, not an exile. She's being protected by the U.S. right now, the U.S. government in Washington, D.C., where she lives.
Don't take my word for it. Here's a photo 3 days ago. She's in Washington at the White House, all smiles, with Congressman Norma Torres. We had a fugitive hanging out in the White House. You can't make this shit up. But Blinken wasn't done playing God. In 2021, he also suspended the visas of 21 more folks.
So he came here. I can speculate that he came here to put pressure on the congressman to not get the antejuicio take off for the electoral magistrates.
They were exposed as the Electoral College to be judged in the judicial system. In that moment, the U.S. government or the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Embassy here in Guatemala took 100 or so visas away from 100 or so congressmen. And additionally, they took 400 additional visas from their families.
Our State Department, the CIA, uses non-governmental organizations to basically build armies in foreign nations, and they have the ability to radicalize citizens. They have the ability to basically pay those employees to go out and stage riots. They call them rent-a-riots in America.
Our government, specifically the CIA, has mastered the art of overthrowing governments. And one of the most recent, and I think the most obvious in how similar they are, is Nicaragua. These protests are as fake as they come. You've got box trucks dropping off paid mercenaries who played dress up as protesters. But here's the cold hard truth. They aren't just mercenaries, they are hitmen for the fucking deep state. I've showed you what they did in Nicaragua.
And they just find these nihilistic drug dealers and criminals who just, they have fun torturing and killing people. And that's exactly what they did. And it's so wild to me because I have interviewed people, grown men who are crying when I'm interviewing them. They're talking about the experience. I interviewed a Sandinista activist in his early 30s whose brother and then his father were both murdered by these right-wing death squads during the coup attempt. And not only that, his brother and his father were murdered, and then their bodies were set on fire, and then the coup-mongers threw those bodies in a garbage can.
Storming homes, executing people in cold blood. Now, look at your scene. These are the same bastards storming the AG's gate. I got it straight from the AG's staff. They genuinely feared that these men that came into Maria's home were there to kill her. This isn't a fucking game, it's gosh damn war.
Well, RFK Jr. just admitted what we've been reporting for years here on this show, that the U.S. government was trafficking children.
We have ended HHS as the role as the vector, a principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking and for sex and for slavery.
On April 12th of 2024, the Attorney General's office sent a letter to Ken Paxton's office stating, and I quote, "It is a pleasure to greet you and wish you success in your daily activities. By higher instruction, I am writing you to request, if you consider it appropriate, your immediate attention to a serious situation affecting the Republic of Guatemala. As the public ministry, we have received a complaint as a criminal report about a very important and sensitive issue, our beloved children. As you know, deficiencies in security and diplomacy related to the border between the United States and Mexico have resulted in a significant increase in drug trafficking, but also a devastating emergence of human trafficking. In relation to a new complaint that has been filed with this institution, a horrifying pattern of disappearances of children from Guatemala has been brought to our attention. It has been reported to the public ministry that a complex network involving non-governmental organizations, NGOs, operating within Guatemala, who collaborate with specific entities in the state of Texas, are implicated in the abuse of Guatemalan children when they are away from their parents and do not have someone to protect them. These Guatemalan children have been reportedly placed in shelters and organizations throughout Texas under the guise of providing them with a family environment. Disturbingly, there have been reports and documented situations of sexual abuse in these shelters, which is a huge violation of the rights and dignity of these children. The state of Texas bears much of this responsibility for these lost children, who have been transferred to the border and processed migratorily in Texas, apparently fully aware of this situation. So I really hope that your citizens start to get pissed off and start demanding that these NGOs have done not a gosh damn thing for you. Nope. All they've done is turn Guatemala into the child kidnapping capital of the world. And let me be crystal clear. The state of Texas knows that this shit is happening, and they're not doing jack shit about it.
This facility should shut down immediately.
But they won't shut it down.
The children should be moved to better staffed and better secured locations.
They won't file charges. They won't do anything.
And Texas Department of Public Safety and Texas Rangers must immediately investigate allegations of child sex abuse.
Because they're all in on it.
And guess what, America? They didn't shut it down. They kept it running. So our government knew that children were being raped in these facilities, and they did nothing to stop it. Are you okay with that? Sure hope not. And the letter continues. Among these non-governmental organizations operating in Guatemala and the state of Texas that may be involved in child trafficking operations include the involvement of, number 1, Save the Children, number 2, Changing the Way We Care, number 3, the World Childhood Foundation, number 4, Arise, number 5, La Unión del Pueblo Entero, and this is concerning. What could be particularly alarming about these organizations is that some of them receive federal funds from American taxpayers. I have been informed that other non-governmental organizations operating in Guatemala and the state of Texas that could be accomplices to child trafficking, possibly supporting this trafficking and other issues with unaccompanied children and adolescents traveling, but they have been proven to be unsuccessful in protecting children in Guatemala. The public ministry, obligated to protect the human rights and interests of the inhabitants of the Republic of Guatemala, will spare no effort and exhaust all necessary efforts to locate and criminally prosecute those responsible for this enormous tragedy. Be assured, the Attorney General and Chief of the Public Ministry of the Republic of Guatemala will zealously execute her legal mandate to eradicate this epidemic of child trafficking and to hold those who commit these crimes against humanity accountable. I respectfully request that you contact us as soon as possible to agree on a joint effort aimed at resolving this humanitarian crisis for which your country is directly responsible in part. Without further ado, I subscribe with the highest expression of my consideration and esteem. Truly, regards. So let me get this straight. The AG of Guatemala reaches out to the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, who's supposed to be the good guy on our side. And to this day, he hasn't even had the decency to respond to the Attorney General of Guatemala. When this letter was sent, there were 85,000 lost children. Today, that number has ballooned to 340,000. And there's an additional 232 children that disappear every damn day. What the hell is going on?
You've got so many now, I can't keep track of how many covering this story. It's so sad that you even have to do this work, for crying out loud. And I know you are just fed up. You are absolutely fed up, and I feel you, man. I feel you, brother, on this. Like, where are these children? Where are the 350,000 children?
Just imagine the countless children who have been raped and assaulted in these facilities because Ken Paxton chose to play fucking politics with their lives.
So our government had all of that geolocation data of every cell phone that was used to receive every single child. And some of these men have received up to like 30 or 40 children. So if our government wanted to, we could have brought all of these children that are still alive home already.
Now, if you're naive enough to think that Southwest Key Programs isn't directly involved in this mix of child trafficking, let me show you a Southwest Key facility that still gives me fucking nightmares. The video you're watching on the screen now is from a recon mission that I did with Audra Morgan, who is an absolute badass. Follow her on X at Eye of the Storm SD. Here's the deal. I was tipped off on this location by a former government whistleblower, who were keeping anonymous for obvious reasons. This whistleblower worked as an escort for Southwest Key Programs. This guy was part of a crew trafficking children from intake facilities in Texas to literally every state. But this spot here at 2205 El Pedro Avenue, Lemon Grove, California, was something else. Just 10 minutes away from a private airport with DHS contracts. Remember those midnight Biden flights?
Throughout the aeropuerto, our local airport, the international airport, La Aurora, certain things happened.
Biden administration plane dropped off kids, illegal alien children, in 3 different cities.
The runway was closed on certain points, and I think that they traffic kids through night. You know, it's the best way of doing it.
Basically, these were secretive overnight flights.
Yeah, this is one of those drop-off sites. Our informant revealed that he'd fly in UACs ages 13 to 17, boys and girls on private jets. Once the flights landed, they had transport vehicles ready on the runway to whisk these children away without anyone noticing. What made this place so strange was that instead of going for large facilities, these children were brought to this house. Not just any house, but one where they mixed teenage boys and girls, all in the throes of puberty. Now here's where it gets insanely disturbing. If we check out nsopw.gov, we can search the National Sex Offender Registry. You'll see that within 1 mile of this house, there are over 51 registered sex offenders. Within a 2-mile radius, the number jumps to 144. But within 3 miles, you're going to be shocked. There are so many pedophiles living within a 3-mile radius of this fucking location in Lemon Grove, California, that the sex offender registry won't even let you complete the search. And I quote, "Warning, the following jurisdiction returns too many records. Please refine your search." That means that there's so many pedophiles living within a 3-mile radius that you can't even search all of them. Why in the hell?
They're all complicit. Our government, and the governments of the entire world for that matter, are controlled by satanic, Kabbalistic pedophiles.
So this first timeline, we're just gonna go through really quick. On September 13th, the fraudulent president makes his campaign promise that he's going to remove this attorney general from power. Just like Fani Willis ran her campaign on getting Trump, this is how this president ran his campaign. While holding a press conference, he asked the president, the current president, to remove the attorney general from power. And that's where you're seeing this 180-day protest outside the attorney general's office. It was our deep state trying to force the current president to fire the attorney general. That way this guy could come in there and, well, it wasn't me, it was the previous president, but that didn't work. Now, from the day he was inaugurated to the current day, this president has waged an unrelenting assault on this attorney general, attempting to slander, discredit, and undermine her investigation every chance he got. Now, fast forward a couple months, on December 8th of 2023,
they released a complete investigation, and on the complete investigation, 32.3% of the 25,111 signatures were considered fraudulent.
4 days later, guess what? Anthony Blinken holds a press conference and suspends the visas to everybody involved in the investigation, and he froze all of the assets to all of them that were in the US. On May 7th of 2024.
Right now you see that President Arevalo here in Guatemala is trying to say that in the Congress they have to pass a modification of the law of Ministerio Público law so he can get rid of the AG right now.
They had some woke attorney general that they liked. Our State Department basically installed an attorney general.
Yes.
They then forced you guys to change the law so the president that didn't agree with their agenda couldn't fire that attorney general. Fast forward 8 years, now they got an attorney general they want to fire, and they're putting pressure on your government to allow the president to fire them.
To return to that law. So yes, that is incoherent, you know, that is a paradox.
Funny enough, just as a show of force, guess who shows up? Anthony Blinken. And he makes a surprise visit to Guatemala to hold a press conference with this president. And he tells them in front of the entire world,
we strongly support the efforts that you're leading to combat corruption. Because absent that, it's very hard to attract the investment necessary to really move the country forward. Absent that, it's hard to have the confidence of faith in the citizens and government and in the institutions and shared responsibility.
Now that you can grasp how ruthless and savage Blinken and this president can be, let me spotlight other key members of the swamp and guide you through this timeline once more. Starting in September 1st of 2023, Todd Robinson. So talk about these, like you're a normal citizen. What are you hearing?
That this guy went to Antigua. He raped a couple of kids. That's the information that's, out in the streets.
Yeah. He's also an angry, gay little African-American man with short man syndrome. He tweeted, Kamala Harris spoke with President-elect Arvelo. September 5th, 2023, Richard R. Verma, who is the Deputy Secretary of State for Management of Resources. He's the former U.S. Ambassador to India, a U.S. Senator, and a U.S. veteran. And he tweets out, on the need for an independent, peaceful transition of power in Guatemala, the U.S. stands with the Guatemalan people and our partners in the intel community in rejecting efforts to undermine Guatemala's democracy. So pay attention to the words they use there. Peaceful transition of power. Undermine Guatemala's democracy. Democracy, democracy. Guatemala is not a democracy, you fucksticks. It's a gosh damn republic, and we're gonna fucking keep it. Check this out, Guatemala. This is the deep state playbook. In 2020, when they rigged the 2020 election in America, they hired every actor in Hollywood that is most likely on Epstein's list. And this is what they said.
More broadly, I think inaugurations signal a tradition of a peaceful transfer of power that is over 2 centuries old.
Well, I think the fact that the three of us are standing here talking about a peaceful transfer of power speaks to the institutional integrity of our country.
So this is an unusual thing. We are both trying to come back to normalcy, deal with totally abnormal challenges, and do what we do best, which is try to make a more perfect union. It's exciting time.
We used to say peaceful transfer of power.
Whenever there's a defeated president or a change in parties,
We know that the peaceful transfer of power is a hallmark of our democracy.
Do you believe that a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, I think there will be a peaceful transfer of power.
October 5th, USAID's official Twitter tweets out, Guatemalan President-elect Bernardo Arevalo was overwhelmingly elected to lead his country forward. In our meeting, we spoke about ensuring the will of the Guatemalan people is respected and working together to strengthen democracy, prosperity, and security, claiming that this president was legit. And next, we have this scumbag Brian Nichols, November 9th of 2023. He says, excellent to meet with President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. Again, this time Washington, D.C. I reenacted that the United States stands firmly on the side of the Guatemalan people who made their voices heard in August. Those who defend democracy will succeed.
Todd Robinson's been involved in this thing. Blinken's also been involved in this thing. Brian Nichols also has been involved in this thing. And whenever a person last year opened its mouth against this regime in the US that's been imposing their things through our system of government, they took visas away, that's public.
Again, on December 8th, 2023, Ambassador, right, key this, Ambassador Brian Nichols, same guy, he's also the Assistant Secretary for the Western Hemisphere Affairs, whatever that means, and he tweeted out, we strongly condemn today's latest anti-democratic actions by the Attorney General of Guatemala, another blatant, unacceptable attempt to defy the will of the Guatemalan people and deny the election of President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. Such actions jeopardize Guatemala's market-friendly reputation and will be met with a strong U.S. response.
The U.S. Justice Department should investigate these people.
Oh, does that mean you're going to overthrow their government? Is that what you mean there, Brian? Why don't you let the gosh damn Guatemalan people and their government figure it out? Maybe we just see the fuck out of their business. January 16, 2024, the day after the State Department installed their puppet president, Ambassador Brian Nichols tweets out, departed Guatemala with Samantha Powers and USAID, inspired by the resilience of the Guatemalan people and democratic institutions, and proud of their American-Guatemala partnership. Looking forward to working with President Bernardo Arevalo and his team towards a secure and prosperous future for our region.
Because Arevalo knows that he was fraudulently installed.
Okay, and it's funny watching all these guys and all their tweets versus now that we know that these parties were corrupt and everything the Attorney General has done is great. So check this out, October 1st, 2023, Brian Nichols. The Attorney General's actions against the Supreme Electoral Tribunal are an affront to democracy. The United States will promote accountability for those who attempt to impede the peaceful transition of power to the administration of the President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. Meaning, we're going to overthrow your gosh damn government whether you like it or not. And if you get in our way, we're going to crush you. Brian Nichols, November 16, 2023. Today's raid by the Attorney General of Guatemala, among other efforts to undermine democracy in Guatemala, are unacceptable. Those who attempt to interfere with a peaceful transition of power to President-elect Bernardo Arevalo will face consequences. So here's our government literally threatening the Attorney General of another country. That has to be illegal, right?
This is your government. I'm astounded.
And I want to jump in here and actually give shout out to somebody that's on our side. And I apologize if I'm saying this name wrong, but on December 1st of 2023, Liga Pro Patria tweeted out, and this on the screen what you're looking at here, this is a letter that breaks down exactly what they said. And she says, Brian Nichols wants UN henchmen to dictate Guatemala's future. Nichols and UN Undersecretary Janka agree to coordinate actions to save democracy in Guatemala. Well, guess what? Guatemalans have no say according to them. We reject foreigners attempting to control our destiny and impose criminals. On January 11th, 2024, Brian Nichols, we condemn the latest actions by the anti-democratic actors in Guatemala, including today's arrest of former Interior Minister Napoleon Bernados for defending the right to peacefully protest. President-elect Bernardo Arevalo and VP-elect Corinne Herrera will take office in January. Fast forward to January 14th of 2024, Ambassador Brian Nichols again tweets out, arrived in Guatemala with Samantha Powers from USAID for the inauguration of President Bernardo Arevalo and VP Karen Herrera. Looking forward to a full scheduled engagement with the Guatemalan partners, regional leaders, and our fantastic team at the U.S. Embassy of Guatemala. January 14, 2024, Samantha Powers, aka Griselda Blanco, tweeted out, "There is no question that Bernardo Arvelo is the president of Guatemala. We call on all sides to remain calm and for the Guatemalan Congress to uphold the will of the people. The world is watching." Now, October 2nd of 2024, the U.S. Embassy of Guatemala tweeted out, "Under Secretary Todd Robinson of the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, the INL, will visit Guatemala from October 1st to the 5th to lead an interagency delegation to participate in first high-level dialogue of security between the United States and Guatemala." Oh, we got a child rapist dictating our narcotics department. Awesome.
He was protected by the former AG here in Guatemala. She has been protected by the U.S. government. She has different processes, legal processes here in Guatemala opened, and she is out of this country, not in exile. She's being protected by the U.S. right now, the U.S. government in Washington, D.C.
October 3rd, 2024. This tweet was by the Guatemalan National Police Department with Todd Robinson, who has been promoted by Anthony Blinken to the 13th Assistant Secretary of State, International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. They tweeted out, "Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Todd Robinson visited the General Dictator of the National Civil Police. There is no tomorrow." Did I lay it out there for you, America? Are you seeing the timeline? Are you seeing how all the pieces play together? Fuck these motherfuckers. Key parts that you think Americans should know. If you had a message to President Trump, what would it be?
I would say to President Trump that he has to defund these ONGs quickly.
Defund the NGOs.
He did it on his first term. We were really glad that USAID was defunded, and we saw that happen, before our eyes. Things changed a lot because we have been dealing with USAID for a long time from this day past. I think that USAID has been here for like 20 years or so, or more, and different NGOs also, because it's not only USAID.
We know that God put us in these positions to everyone, not only the AG Maria Consuelo Porras Argueta, because she is our leader, She has been under attack like no one in the world, maybe just only President Trump. Yeah, because it's the same pattern, It's the same form of attack in the media, by the judicial system, cutting all the cooperation to the institution. There is a lot of attack. So we have a good leader that believes in God and knows that she's doing the right thing, and she's not going to rest on doing the right thing.
You just said that, so for the last year you've been fighting election fraud?
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for free just because it needs to be done and nobody was doing it?
Yeah.
That's literally the definition of patriotism.
Yeah.
And it's men like you that the history books end up writing volumes about, because everybody else stood by. So
yeah,
you should be proud of yourself for the service that you're providing for your country.
Thank you.
And the citizens should understand that it's men like you that are going to save their lives. After all the damage that our government's caused, the least they could fucking do is clean up their own goddamn mess.
I don't know if you noticed, but her braces are donated by friends of mine too.
Really?
We're making, no one leaves here without a beautiful smile.
Ah.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you not just to share a story, but to ignite a spark of compassion, a flame of action in each of our hearts. I want to talk about men like Bob McDonnell, an American patriot whose heart beats for humanity beyond borders. Bob McDonnell, a man whose life's mission has led him to the streets of El Salvador, not for personal gains, but to combat one of the darkest trades on earth, human trafficking. In my travels across this vast country, investigating the grim realities of child trafficking, I have witnessed the despair and the hope, the darkness and the light. Amidst the many organizations I've encountered, there is one that stands out, a beacon of true safety and rehabilitation, Mi Casa Kids, led by Bob McDonnell. His organization, the House of Life, is not just about rescue, it's about transformation. Bob's mission goes way beyond rescue. He provides a sanctuary for those who have suffered the unimaginable. Women and children who are not only trafficked but often violated by those who they should have trusted the most, their family and relatives. These survivors, all of whom have become pregnant through such heinous acts, find not just temporary shelter at Bob's facility, but a home where they can nurture and raise their children. The transformations I witnessed in these young mothers and these children is nothing short of miraculous. The joy and happiness on the faces of these children, who knew nothing but fear and pain, is a testament to the healing power of the love and security provided by Bob's organization. Knowing where these children came from versus where they are after spending just 1 year under Bob's care, it's a fucking miracle. What this man has done for these children, I've never seen anything like it. If you guys could just skip 1 cup of coffee, this is where you send your money. This guy's truly saving lives. Oh, yeah, is there anything that she would like to tell me, or anything that she feels is important that other people know?
Que es muy bonito y es un lugar muy especial para las madres que aquí pueden tener muchas oportunidades. That here is a very special place, and it's a very good place, and it's a place where young mothers can have a lot of opportunities.
Now imagine for a moment, if you will, the life of these children. Picture their fear, their pain, and their desperate need for salvation. Now consider that, with a donation as modest as the cost of your daily coffee, you could be part of their rescue. For every $30,000 donated, the House of Life can prevent 12,000 individuals from enduring the horrors of rape and abuse. Let that sink in. Your small act of kindness can literally save thousands from a lifetime of trauma.
Between the ages of 12 and 17 years old in New York City, this little girl was raped, we guess, about 60,000 times before she was finally set free. And that's the fate of thousands of children.
I was ignorant. So the fastest growing enterprise in the world is child sex trafficking.
Fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world is the selling of people.
In a world often overshadowed by individual pursuit and self-interest, here stands Bob McDonnell, a testament to what one person's resolve can achieve. His work isn't about borders or nationalities. It's about the universal language of human kindness and justice. He's not just saving lives, he's restoring hope and dignity where there was absolutely none. I ask you today, with the warmth of your morning coffee in your hands, to consider the power of a simple donation. If you could, skip just 1 cup of coffee, or perhaps a few. Imagine the difference that money could make when pooled together. It's not just about the money, it's about what that money represents, our collective empathy, or commitment to humanity. Each one of us has the power to change the narrative for somebody else. Every dollar you donate is a step towards breaking the chains of human trafficking. It's an investment in a future where every child can grow up free and where every woman can walk without fear. Let's honor the spirit of men like Bob McDonnell by joining his mission. Let's make a concise choice to part with small luxury, knowing fully well that our sacrifice can lead to somebody else's salvation. Together, let's build a house of life in every corner of the world where darkness lurks, turning it into light. Thank you, and may we all find the courage to act, the heart to care, and the willingness to give. Remember, it's not just about money, it's about making a difference, 1 cup of coffee at a time. Together, we can change the world. If you'd like to learn more about Bob's organization, please watch the full interview. It'll be linked down in the description, or it'll be posted in the comments as well. Bob is truly a hero. Words can't describe what I saw. I've been to a lot of these facilities that claim that they actually care for children, and you see how the children are treated in these facilities here in America. The look on these girls' faces when I walked in and I was with Bob, and seeing them laugh and smile and joke, and the love they have for Bob. He's became the father figure that every one of these women, Bob's became the father figure that every one of these children wish they had. Bob is the father that every one of us wish we had as well. I've never found one in this entire time of doing this, one organization that I could tell you, America, that yes, if you donate here, your money will directly go to saving children. And I'll do one further. I'm going to be down in El Salvador quite often. So I'll show you where your money's going. Please consider watching the videos down below in the description. This man's really saving lives. The QR code you are looking at here on the screen is Bob's PayPal. Bob also has Venmo, and he also has donation links directly on his website. We have got him set up so no matter how you'd like to donate, he can accept your donations. PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, and I believe a GiveSendGo. All of which will be right down below in the description. $5, guys. This isn't America. Bob doesn't need hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. He needs $30,000 to bring in another 6 girls off the street. He already has the girls waiting. He just needs to secure the funding. I promised him that we would do it. So help Bob, help me raise this $30,000. And I'll give you a front row seat so you can hear directly from the kids. Could you imagine getting raped by your father, your uncle, your brother? Could you imagine getting raped by your cousin and then going to your grandma at 6 just to have your grandma beat you bloody and tell you that it was your fault because you wore shorts? That is the trauma that these girls have been through. That's one of their stories. And the joy that I've seen on these girls' faces, I'll show you. God bless you guys.
Dear Cash Patel, I am writing you as we have just concluded our investigative documentary, Operation Amber Alert Guatemala. Our team has uncovered and documented the trafficking of over 452,121 migrant children into the United States, all of which facilitated by a troubling public-private partnership. Our findings indicate direct involvement from key figures such as Alejandro Mayorkas through his public-private partnership with Mexican cartels and HHS Xavier Becerra via his agency's direct funding with NGOs who have been raided in Guatemala for the trafficking of migrant children into America. Our documentary provides comprehensive evidence that should facilitate the insurance of the arrest warrants, not only for these high-ranking officials, but also for every NGO that has received funding from USAID, HHS, or the U.S. State Department, which were all implicated in the oversight and welfare of these children. We are presenting this documentary to you in hopes that it will catalyze swift and decisive action from your office. The depths and the breadth of this evidence we've gathered should be compelling enough to move forward with legal proceedings. Now, Cash Patel, the only question we have for you is, what are you going to do about it? Guatemalan patriots, wake up. We are sick and tired of this corruption and the bullshit that's tearing your country apart. It's time to take a stand, to shout from the rooftops, and to fight for your future. Sign our call to action number 2, which is demanding the resignation of President Arvelo and the entire Semilla party. They have failed you, they neglected your children, and they have turned a blind eye to the very atrocities that are happening right under their noses. Arvelo and his cronies must go. Enough is enough. We need 1 million signatures to send a message. The sovereign citizens of Guatemala are done with this shit. Go to OperationAmberAlert.com and sign the fucking petition. Don't just sit there. Your inactions make you complicit. Let's roar together. Let's make them hear us. And let's reclaim your gosh damn country. Visit OperationAmberAlert.com now. Sign, share, and get your neighbors, your family, and everyone you know to do the same. This is your moment. This is your fight. Let's make history, and let's go down fighting. OperationAmberAlert.com. Sign it now.
Start with the law and then kind of walk through what's happened again.
I literally didn't have enough money to make payroll. I was like, okay, I know God's gonna do this, but I'm not sure how he's going to. Then you walked in the place and were touched by God, put this video out, 200 of your supporters gave us $25,000, and now I can make payroll. I can pay the Christmas bonus that's required by law down here, which is 2 weeks pay every December, and we have enough funds to take 6 more girls.